Final hour of the Green Mountain Mornings program underway at 16 minutes past 8 o'clock. No edition of the Commons free on stands this week. You go to commonsnews.org. You can certainly see the news from the previous week, but that does not prevent Randy Holhut, the deputy editor, from joining us for his customary conversation on Fridays to talk about news and issues that affect the community. Happy New Year to you, Randy.
Happy New Year, Chris. Happy New Year, everyone. Hi, Joyce.
Hi, Joyce. Happy New Year to her as well. I'm assuming you said Happy New Year to her already.
Yes, it's the 6th of January.
Yeah, it didn't take you that long to say Happy New Year's to
yes,
to
but
Joyce.
It is Happy Three Kings Day.
It is. Oh, it is Three Kings Day. You're right. Cool stuff going on, and we've also begun. Basically, that's the start of
our Mardi Gras.
Of Mardi Gras. Yeah, I got to go get my king cake. So no issue. This is the week that the Commons customarily always takes off. It usually happens the week between Christmas and New Year's. Am I right in remembering that?
Yeah, that's normally when it happens, but because of the calendar this year and other considerations, we decided to take it off this first week of January. But of course, the first week of January is always the start of the ledge. And this year, the inauguration of a new governor and new leadership in the House and the Senate, and the game begins again. Yeah,
in other words, a lot of news to report on, and that people will see, no doubt, in next Wednesday's edition of Commons when that comes out on stands. And maybe a little more significant than usual for us here in Windham County, with outgoing Governor Peter Shumlin being a native of our area, and certainly a time to look back and reflect with his farewell address. Just your impressions of it. We both did some emailing back and forth yesterday after reading the transcript. What were your thoughts about what Governor Shumlin said as he summed up his career?
Well, it certainly was a robust defense of his record, and really, despite what happened to him in the last year of where his unpopularity reached really high levels, he can walk out of the State House and feel that he did a really good job for the state. The unemployment's down, the budgets were balanced, the basic values of Vermont were upheld.
Yeah,
and I think we're in a really good place right now. I mean, it's Phil Scott kind of went dark in his inaugural address, as compared to kind of the optimism that you'd expect from an outgoing governor who wants to defend his record.
Right. And I do feel like there was a couple of messages back and forth between the two, even though I think overall their relationship was probably pretty good. I think the portion of Governor Shumlin's speech where he talked about, keep this number in mind, 3.7%. That's the average growth rate of Vermont's total funds budget over the last 6 years, and that's in line with the state's economic growth. That was a direct response, I would say, to Phil Scott's campaign, where he talks about tying economic growth to budget growth. Did you take it that way?
Yeah, that's kind of a warning shot to Governor Scott that, hey, don't screw up my legacy.
Right. And what do you think? I mean, when you think they talk about Governor Shumlin maybe a decade from now, if they were to talk about him and his legacy, what would you say would be one of the lasting things that people would remember about this past 6 years?
I think Vermont Health Connect would be one of them. As someone who uses it,
yeah,
and appreciates its existence, I think despite all the complaining about the computers. That was a misstep, certainly, that cost the state some money. But in terms of execution and delivery of the insurance, I've got no complaints, and I suspect that there are many other Vermonters that would say who are on Health Connect that would say similarly.
Yeah, well, hopefully they will speak out as that conversation continues, both here in the state as well as across the nation. I would say his attention to addiction. And treating addiction as an illness and something that needs to be addressed more than just on a law enforcement level. Certainly Vermont got a lot of attention when he gave that State of its State address, and certainly to change that conversation the way he did in Vermont, and to a certain degree, I think, outside of Vermont. I think the governor deserves a lot of credit for that.
And Governor Scott also picked up that thread in his address.
Yeah, that was one of the things he acknowledged Governor Shumlin for when he said some appreciative things about it. Do you think now, I mean, we have a long history of Peter Shumlin up in Montpelier representing us here down in Windham County. Was he a different person at the beginning of his political career in 1991? You've been on the scene pretty much that whole time, so you can think about that whole span of time when he's been probably had many conversations with him over that time.
Yes, and certainly the only governor I've in my time here in Vermont where I've had such a kind of a friendship.
Really?
Joyce and I have had over the years because he's a neighbor. We've seen him around everywhere, and and he definitely was not awed by the job when he became governor, and rose to the occasion when necessary. I mean, you figure as a communicator, you're dealing with a dyslexic who doesn't read from prepared scripts. He does this stuff out of his head mostly.
Yeah.
And he's a very intelligent guy and a very big-hearted guy, I think, and a very interesting guy. I mean, the admonishment he gave to us at the last Vermont Press Association awards dinner up in Montpelier back in last March was, "You're going to miss me when I'm gone. The next governor's not going to be as interesting as me."
No, I think that's very true.
I don't think Phil Scott's going to be chasing bears in the buff or
right, or pictures of, well, I mean, Phil Scott, he says he's going to still race, right? So we're going to have a governor out there trading paint on the track.
Well, I doubt that his state trooper will be riding shotgun with him.
Indeed. But that does wrap up, well, maybe not with a political career for Shumlin. Do you think he has a next act? Do you think he tries to go to Washington, D.C. if a vacancy opens up?
Well, I think he chills in Putney for a while, and I waits for something to open up, because I think, certainly everyone's saying this has to be Pat Leahy's last term. This has to be. But he's still vigorous, and it shows no sign of wanting to leave, although, maybe Marcel will tell him,
right,
Pat, maybe you ought to retire now.
Yeah, That's home.
The only way I see that happening.
Yeah, indeed. We have more to talk about with the transition of administrations up in the State House, as well as things happening here locally. Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of the Commons, my guest for the remainder of today's Green Mountain Mornings program. Back with more after the bottom of the hour news break. 23 degrees outside at 21 minutes before the 9 o'clock hour. Chris Lenois back with you on the Green Mountain Mornings program, continuing our conversation with Randy Holhut, Deputy Editor of the Commons. commonsnews.org is the web address where you can go and become a member and support this reader-supported, award-winning, independent news and views source for Windham County and all the news they bring us each and every week, except for this week, where there isn't a print edition of the paper. So we're talking about some of the things that will no doubt be covered in next week's edition of the Commons, and perhaps a little bit more about the transition from the Shumlin administration to the Phil Scott administration up in Montpelier. And Randy, the inauguration address from Phil Scott yesterday after being sworn in, we talked a little bit about Peter Shumlin's comments trying to clarify his record around the economy and around growth. And I think you rightly pointed to healthcare as being one of the two issues that probably divides the governor from his lieutenant governor, who is now taking his role as governor. And a couple of the things that I saw in Phil Scott's inauguration speech that were pointed, I think, at Governor Shumlin. One of them right at the end, which got one of the longest applause times, was towards the end of the speech, where he said, "I will not support or carry out experiments at the taxpayer's expense." And I think that is going to be one of the big differences between Governor Shumlin and Governor Scott, which makes sense when you're talking about going from liberal to conservative.
Yeah, that your natural instinct is to not try anything new, and I'm afraid that takes us back to the Jim Douglas years, where they didn't try anything new.
Right, right, and I think that experiments at taxpayer expenses is a direct reference to Vermont Health Connect, and then now possibly this all-payer model that has been proposed. And Al Gobey, who is the chair of the Green Mountain Care Board, now stepping in as the Agency of Human Services Secretary. And obviously a lot of these things depend on what's happening on the national level with healthcare. But I think if anything like that is in a budget submitted by the legislature, it's going to be vetoed. And then we really see where those dividing lines are between a Democratic-controlled legislature and a Republican-controlled administration.
Well, considering that there's still let's not totally veto-proof, but throw in the independents and progressives into the mix, and the Democrats can override vetoes. That any kind of plans to overhaul health care have to be meet with legislative muster.
Right.
And I really, and then the big thing, of course, with the Republicans in Washington hell-bent on destroying the Affordable Care Act and not coming up with a replacement is, what is Vermont going to do to continue its health care programs?
Right. Yeah.
And I really don't have a great deal of faith that Vermont will continue Health Connect in any kind of form because of the cost of it, because it's really dependent on federal money, and there's going to be much less of it coming back to Vermont.
And we've heard Phil Scott say, more on the transportation issue than on the health care issue, but talking about wanting to be more lean in terms of state expenditures on things and rely more on federal dollars, right? So, I mean, you definitely can read the writing on the wall.
Yeah, but there's not going to be a lot that one. We're going to go back to the budgets during the Great Recession, where it was agencies scrambling for limited resources and really difficult choices being made, and people who are vulnerable getting the short end of the stick.
Yeah. Now, affordable housing, another thing that Governor Scott touched on yesterday in his inauguration, and amid all the transition, he made the announcement for his housing commissioner, and it's going to be former Guilford Town Administrator Katie Buckley, somebody who I have a passing knowledge of, paying attention to things happening in Guilford through the Commons, through Brattleboro Community Television, and covering the Guilford Select Board meetings. Your thoughts about Katie Buckley? Any experiences that you have with her? No
direct experiences with Katie Buckley. Just what Wendy's reported over the last couple of years writing about Guilford, and I think it's a really good choice given her experience with the Wyndham and Windsor Housing Trust and other economic development activities that she's been involved in, like the Friends of Algiers Village. I think she's going to do a really good job in that position, and I'm very happy that she got it.
And I think, at least from my immediate recollection, the lone Wyndham County person who is going to serve as part of Phil Scott's administration right now. I can't think of another one. I know Laura Sedillo. Oh, right. So that's right. Pichek was reappointed, too. So that's good. Okay, a couple Wyndham County folks is still up there in the administration. And, of course, in the underpinnings of the leadership in both the House and Senate, with Tristan Tolino and Emily Long as the whip and deputy whip, and Becca Ballant successfully getting her bid for Senate Majority Leader. We should feel good about our representation up there, despite not having Governor Shumlin anymore, don't you think?
Yeah, it's going to make a difference having Becca Ballant as the majority leader in the Senate, because really she's now the highest ranking state official from Wyndham County. And Tristan and Emily, by dint of their work for the party, they've risen up to the important leadership positions in the House.
Right.
Those are usually the positions that you're kind of warming up in the bullpen to take over for as Speaker.
Yeah, warming up in the bullpen. Pitchers and catchers report in a couple of weeks, right? And
February 14th.
February 14th. Not that you're looking forward to it too much.
No, not that I'm counting the days or anything.
Yeah. Speaking of changes in leadership, an announcement from David Gartenstein, the chair of the Brattleboro Select Board, on Tuesday, while saying that petitions are now available for people who want to run for elected office in the town of Brattleboro, saying he is not going to seek re-election to the Select Board. So serving 6 years on the board, 4 years as chair, leaving a pretty big space on that board, I would say.
And a welcome one to be filled by somebody other than David, because we have vehemently disagreed over the years over his approach of the whole Hubtown concept and the constant whining about poor Brattleboro. Everyone is taking advantage of us, and without recognizing the fact that without all the other towns in Wyndham County, Brattleboro would not really exist in its current form. And I don't know of any town in New England that has that role as a hub town that complains about that. Do you hear Northampton complaining that everybody from Hampshire County goes there to shop and work, or Amherst, or Worcester, or Springfield, or even Boston?
Yeah, it seems like something that he's certainly tried to advocate for, even going up to Montpelier at different times with the board and try to advocate for that position without success. Was it surprising to you that he's stepping down?
Yes, it is, because of course he's still pushing those ideas, and I think they're meeting with more and more resistance. But he's in a difficult position because property taxes in Brattleboro are high. You know that. You're a homeowner
Oh,
there.
yeah, absolutely.
And there's no commercial base, or the commercial base that there was doesn't exist anymore. And there's an awful lot of nonprofits in Brattleboro that cuts down your tax base further, and you're just watching like the retail sector that's all in Keene now.
Yeah. It was interesting to me, too, the timing of it. You feel like there's some closure around the police fire facility discussion, finally, moving forward with that project. It's so nice to see the fire station in West Brattleboro being constructed. Nice to hear that things are underway at the Elliott Street Fire Station and that they've closed on the Reformer building now and working on plans to turn that into the police headquarters. But it does still feel like there's different things going on in the community that he's kind of stepping away in the middle of. I think about the whole Harmony lot situation or some of the different things that have happened since they've done new zoning regulations. So yeah, I wonder what the decision is in his timing. Is he just sick of it? Is he just sick of being, part of the select board and being a lightning rod the way the elected officials tend to be?
I would imagine there's a certain amount of that, too, and that he'd be happy to let somebody else. But it'd be interesting to see who would step up to take his place.
Yeah.
With that, and is Kate O'Connor going to make a play for being the chair?
Yeah, certainly.
Who's going to run for the two seats? I mean, and it's being a select board member is a pretty thankless job.
Yeah. Well, Avery Schwenk made a pretty good run at it in the last election cycle, and I don't think he was dissuaded from doing it. So he may get a chance here with a vacancy.
Well, I would put a big caveat on that because the Hermit Thrush Brewery is planning a big expansion there in the process of getting one of the old Leader beverage buildings on the Dummerston-Brattleboro town line that they're going to turn into their new brewery.
Really? Oh, I had not heard that. Okay.
Yeah, that one kind of our ace documents guy, Mike Farr, happened to see an Act 250 permit for that.
Uh-huh. Okay.
So the little Pepsi building of that complex,
right,
kind of cat a corner from Supreme Fitness. That's going to be the new home of if all goes well, of Hermit Thrush Brewery. I have no idea whether they're going to keep their tasting room downtown. I'd figure they would just for visibility's sake.
Sure.
But they're selling an awful lot of beer. If you go into the High Grove lot on certain times of the week, you see pallets of that stuff in the High Grove lot waiting for the truck to come to pick it up to take it to distribute it to other places around Vermont and the Northeast.
Well, yeah, and so yeah, your point is well taken that he may be a little too busy to run for select board, but great for them. Congratulations to the Hermit Thrush guys. That's a real success story for them and for the town of Brattleboro now. So I'm sure we'll see a story about that Act 250 permit in the pages of the Commons with Mike Fair's byline sometime soon. He's also working on the story. We reported on it here on KVT yesterday. This press release coming out from the Department of Labor about Sonnax up in Bellows Falls getting sued, and I know Mike is working on that story now. That'll be in next week's edition?
Yes. But this now, employee stock ownership programs, those are usually good things.
Right.
You rarely hear bad things about that. And Sonnax became an ESOP, as they're known, back in 2011.
Yep, employee stock ownership program, and something that they've been heralded for, like Chroma, being employee-owned and giving their employees a voice. But apparently it's also something that can benefit the board members, according to that press release.
Yeah, and apparently the owners of the company there was a bit of a difference between the money they got and the money the employees got. Right.
Selling their stock, the president and CEO and the board member, I don't have the press release right in front of me, so I'm not going to say their names, but for almost $50 million, right? $48.8 million?
That Sonnax purchased the stock from Tommy Harmon, the president, and let me go back here because I'm looking.
You've got it in front of you. Harmon is the president and CEO, and then one of the board members. Their combined value of their stock getting
48. Frederick Fritz was one of the board members.
Fritz, right?
So that was $48.8 million, and then they'd issue new shares to the employees. That would be $10 million.
Right.
So where'd the other $38.8 million go?
I mean, I was just actually thinking off air about that. That's so blatant, right? I mean, such a gap between the value that it was sold for and then the value of the new issue. I mean, it's got to raise a red flag.
Well, as the government suit says, the banking group that was involved in this caused the ESOP to significantly overpay by millions of dollars for highly leveraged Sonnax stock, thereby failing to loyally and prudently represent the interests of the ESOP and its participants and beneficiaries. That's according to the government lawsuit.
Right. And
you don't hear that very often with an employee stock ownership plan.
No, and certainly not the kind of publicity that Sonnax wants to be getting in 2017, but nice to know that Mike is on the trail, and we'll be able to read about that in next week's edition of the Commons. Now, I saw you briefly Tuesday night at the Brattleboro Union High School Gymnasium. I couldn't stay for the St. Johnsbury game with the Brattleboro girls varsity team, the Lady Colonels, where St. Johnsbury got a little bit of revenge, a little bit of payback for Brattleboro's upset win in last year's quarterfinals. Your thoughts on that game?
You could tell that they only played one game in the last 3 weeks.
Uh-huh.
Between the holiday and the schedule and the weather, that the awful lot of rust.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like they have some talent on that team, and I talked to Coach Freed before the game for our little pregame vignette, and he certainly seemed to feel really good about the leadership he had from the seniors, and then the way some of the underclassmen have come along, like Haley DeRoja, and I think he has reasonably high expectations for this team, much like the boys' team. I think Brattleboro has a chance to make some noise in Division I basketball this year, but not on Tuesday night.
No, I mean, there's undoubtedly a lot of talented players in that team, but you need somebody that can take over. You need an Isaiah Thomas that owns the fourth quarter.
That's right. And we're talking the Celtics' Isaiah Thomas, or the Pistons' Isaiah Thomas. We could talk about either Isaiah Thomas, right, and be accurate in that front.
But the same thing, that just somebody that can just, this is the fourth quarter, this is my quarter, get out of the way.
Yeah, indeed. Well, hopefully somebody will step up and do that in their next game, and hopefully we'll be there to see it, and we'll see you at that game as well. Always a pleasure talking to you on these Friday mornings, Randy. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend. We'll talk to you next week.
Okay.
All right. commonsnews.org, the web address for your reader-supported independent news and views source for Windham County. We will be back with a brief wrap-up of this week's edition of Green Mountain Mornings after these messages.